Yes, welcome to Sports Scene for another week. Kevin Brayshaw here with you as always. Plenty to talk about in the sporting world. We'll get straight to it. Craig Crowley is joining me at the desk. Craig, welcome to the show.
G'day, Kev. How are you, mate?
Very good, thanks, mate. It's been a big week in sport, particularly in the world of tennis. Big five-setter last night between Andy Murray and Roger Federer. We'll talk about all of that and more today. Also joining us, Mr. Darren Madigan. Darren, welcome to Sports Scene again.
Good morning and happy Australia Day. I am
G'day,
Australian,
mate.
Right?
Yes, happy Australia Day to everybody. It's a bit wetter than most people would want on Australia Day. It might get in the way of the beach and barbecue that we're all used to, but I'm sure everyone will find a way to celebrate it nonetheless. Happy Australia Day to everybody. We'll get straight to the results, and the big one last night, Andy Murray over Roger Federer in 5 sets, 6-4, 6-7, 6-3, 6-7, 6-2. Darren Madigan, what a match it was. Plenty of hype leading into it, and it definitely lived up to it.
I'm in mourning, but in all seriousness, Murray was fantastic.
Yes, he was.
He really was. It was. It's funny. Courier called it at the start of the match. He said, "I'm betting on an epic here," and he got one. Went to 5 sets. I started to think it's a prerequisite of a semi-final at the Australian Open. There has to be a big 5-set match before the final. Over the last few years, that seems to have been the way things have gone down. Look, Federer at times was at his best. Murray was just playing on a different level as he has over the past year or so now, since he's got his confidence. I think the fascinating thing to watch with Murray, apart from obviously what's going to happen tomorrow with Djokovic, is how 2013 is going to treat him. Whether he's going to go on with this and, really consolidate those 4 top players at the top of the game and see exactly how far ahead of the rest of the pack they remain. But, yeah, he deserved the win. He was fantastic. Once he broke him in the 5th set, it was pretty much all over, Red Rover. And, what do you do? I mean, Federer's throwing his best at you. He's serving well. He's picking those balls up or half volleys off his shoelaces like he often does on the baseline, and it's still coming back and beating him at the other end.
There's very few players that would have pushed it to 5 sets last night. Roger Federer did a terrific job to stay with Andy Murray. He was terrific and thoroughly deserved victory. We'll talk about all the tennis in after the next break, and especially we'll have to talk about these top 4 guys and how far ahead of the pack they really are, because you mentioned before there's the big epic matches that come in before the finals. It's always when these top 4 meet each other. They're so evenly matched and yet so far ahead of the others in the big games when it matters. We'll talk about that after the first break. We also had the women's doubles final last night. Ash Barty and Casey Dellacqua unfortunately going down to Irani and Vinci. It was 6-2, 3-6, 6-2. But I tell you what, this Ash Barty's got some talent. She's going to be something for the future of women's tennis in Australia. As I say, we'll talk about all the Australian Open action after the first break in about 7 minutes' time. In the A-League, the Central Coast Mariners get up 3-1 over Adelaide United. This was a cracking game. Adelaide United 1-0 at halftime, but the Mariners come home strong in front of their home fans to get the 3-1 victory and solidify their spot at the top of the ladder. They are flying, the Central Coast Mariners. In the NBL, Cairns getting up 85-71 over Melbourne. Perth 62-59 over Townsville. And on Thursday night, the New Zealand Breakers 95-76 over the Sydney Kings. That is their 8th straight. They're way out in front on top of the NBL ladder at the moment. The New Zealand Breakers, hard to see anybody catching them at this stage. And in the ABL, the Brisbane Bandits up against the Sydney Blue Sox, unfortunately went down 13-0. Bit of a shellacking down there at the hands of Sydney. Puts their final spot in real jeopardy. Top 3 goes through. They were right on the precipice going into this one. It was a big loss for them that could prove costly. There are 2 more games against Sydney this weekend. They've got to win them both if there are any chance of making it through to the final. Big show planned today. One of the things that's made international headlines that we'll talk about in the second hour, but we'll talk briefly now. Eden Hazard, Chelsea midfielder, has kicked a ball boy, and it's made headlines around the world, and there's even an app about it, isn't there, Darren?
Oh, I couldn't believe it. I mean, we always talk about how jokes happen really quickly when something bad happens in life around the place. But now there's actually, I think it was an iPhone app or something like that, and basically it's kicked the ball boy.
Yes.
So it didn't take them long.
No, but it was a very, very strange phenomenon. You don't see this sort of thing very often in sport where someone goes after a ball boy, do you? It was a weird, crazy thing that happened, a real brain snap. He's got a mandatory 3-game suspension for the red card, but they're looking at extending that for obvious reasons. I mean, he kicked a ball boy. But at the same time, there's questions to be answered for that ball boy who was, I feel, deliberately lying on that ball to waste time. I mean, you can't excuse the bloke kicking him, but the ball boy was clearly wasting time. Don't you think, Darren?
Look, we've lost him.
May have lost him. We'll get him back on the line in a little bit. But yes, we'll talk about Aiden Hazard kicking that ball by a little later.
What is it with the sports people? Like, forget the tennis player who did it last year. You know, you don't need to. You know, they're serving a purpose, and whether it be deliberate or accidental or whatever the case may be, geez, kids are kids, and they're very impressionable, and you don't need to do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You know, the kid would have cop whatever the consequences for sitting on the ball, but that's just ridiculous, you know. And you've got to remember these guys are profile people. They're role models. They've just got to seem to be doing the right thing. And you know, people talk at length about they get good money and all that sort of stuff, but they are public figures, and they've got to treat themselves in that way too. Make sure they are doing the right thing. It's more than just like a sports person these days.
Exactly right. You got it completely wrong, Aiden Hazard, and he's going to pay a price for it. We'll also talk about Gill versus Mundine 2 coming up this week. A big fight. Really hyped up. I can't remember a fight between two Australian fighters being hyped up as much as this, probably since Mundine versus Danny Green a few years back. It's really been hyped up.
The best sportsman in the world, ever, in Australia ever. Come on. Like, you got to respect the person. He is a good sports person, but you know that I think a lot of he's rubbed off a lot of people. Kev, I don't know what you think. And look, he does talk with his fists, and that's great. But come on, it's really for a Australia Day program. It's not the Australian thing to do, is it, really?
I mean, that's Anthony Mundine, though, isn't he? He talks a big game, always has. It's part of how he gets into the head of his opponents and all the rest of it. It's just the way he is, and we've got to learn to accept it. And boxing, this is something I'll say later in the show as well. Boxing it's a strange thing in that you can be a bad guy in boxing and be successful. Because for everyone who signs up to buy the fight to see you win, there's people buying the fight to see you get knocked out as well.
Oh, that's
so
right.
If Anthony Mundine is the biggest bad guy he can be, it drives up the pay-per-view buys, which is more money in his pocket.
Yeah, look, granted, you're 100% right, you know, and it is attracting people to the match. You know, the amount of people I spoke to last night were actually saying, I just want to fight to see him get beaten. And I thought, well, he's doing the right thing, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the sport has changed so much. I think a lot of the pay-per-view side of things and everything is been rather a big deal amongst it all. But, you know, when we were growing up, Craig, I mean, the old heavyweight championship of the world and things like that, it was a Saturday or Sunday afternoon big affair on free-to-air television. You all stood around the TV watching this thing. The lower weight divisions where people like Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns and people like that were fighting. Unfortunately, during the 90s and early 2000s, the sport simply lost its way. And with all the controversies that came around it became very hard to get excited about the sport anymore. And that's a shame because, you know, it's the one true, apart from running, I suppose, where there's no equipment involved, you're running against the other person. It's the last gladiatorial thing that's left in sport, you know, two guys with fists with gloves on, belting each other.
Well, we'll talk about that in the second hour. Plenty to talk about on the show. We're also going to start our build towards the 2013 NRL season. We're going to do 2 or 3 teams a week and just look at their ins and outs for the season and preview about how we think they're going to go. This week we're going to go from the bottom up. So we're going to look at Parramatta, Penrith and the New Zealand Warriors this week. That'll be in the second hour. We'll also talk about England getting their first ever series win over Australia in the netball, Darren. And I know we've got plenty to say about that. So we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll talk about the Australian Open, the business end of the Australian Open.
Logan City's 101 FM needs your support to allow us to continue to deliver local news, local views, local interviews and the very best music mix. Help us to maintain the service by pledging your donation now on 3808 1101. Thank you from the original voice of Logan City, 101 FM.
Severe weather is a constant threat to homes in Queensland and a constant help through it all, Queensland's army of SES volunteers. 132500 is now the only phone number you need for the SES during storms and floods. It'll put you in contact with the SES no matter where you are in Queensland.
Store the number in your phone now because when things get frantic, it's comforting to know the SES is only a call away when you dial 132500.
Life. Life is for living. So live it. Life. Life is for giving. So give it. Giving blood is cool. Needing it isn't. Red Cross. Give a little. Life is for living. Life is for giving. Help save lives. Please give blood.
101 FM.
You're listening to Saturday Sports Scene on 101 FM.
Welcome back to Sports Scene here on 101 FM. It is 16 minutes past 8 here on Australia Day 2013. Hope you're enjoying it wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. Kevin Brayshaw, Craig Crowley and Darren Madigan with you. It's time to talk a little bit of the Australian Open. Of course, we touched on it at the top of the show. Andy Murray, Roger Federer went to 5 sets last night. Andy Murray getting up 6-4, 6-7, 6-3, 6-7, 6-2. It's a mouthful, that score, but it was a great match, really emotional, good stuff. Andy Murray, that was his first ever win over Roger Federer in a Grand Slam. Darren, he has just gone to another level. Ever since he had that breakthrough win over Federer at the Olympics last year, Murray is a different player. He's got so much more confidence, and he is a real force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, look, apart from the obvious where the Olympics was such an important match in his career overall, I can't express just how important last night's win was for him in terms of his career. As we kept on saying ad nauseum during the coverage, this is the first time that he's beaten Federer in a slam. And, you know, that's the monkey off the back in a lot of ways. I mean, you've got to get that one over, because everyone recognises Roger plays his best those 4 times each year. And, you know, really, he's gone out there and you just can't praise him enough, I mean, for the way he actually played last night. It was a great match. I mean, make no mistake, Federer played well. I mean, you know, he came out there and he might not be his absolute best, but, geez.
Murray just had all the answers, didn't he?
He really did. He's got all the angles, the shots that they're playing. And I tell you what, if you love the game or you're a club player or something like that out there these days, take advantage when these tournaments come around, especially the Australian Open. The coverage is so good now with the camera angles, and you can actually get a really good idea of what these guys are actually doing, because the angles that they're getting on court these days, it's just not human.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that these guys are doing, it really is incredible. The other thing too is, you know, you look at someone like Federer, his grip, the way he plays his forehand, and that he's got about 7 or 8 different shots that he can play just off that one grip, and there's, you know, no other player in the world that can do that, yet Murray came out and negated that last night.
Darren, just a question too with Andy Murray. Like, obviously, we spoke about this during last year about, you know, when and if he gets his title victory, will it just open up the floodgates? Do you think to a certain extent he's doing it in baby steps? He seems to be very patient the way he's doing it, because it hasn't just been, bang, I'm just going to take everything in his stride. He's sort of like, you know, it's still a thing for him to beat Federer here, so that was one thing he had to achieve. Obviously, was the US Open?
Yes, US Open last year.
That was just another step. Like, he's not like, bang, I'm just winning everything. He's just taking bit by bit, piece by piece. Very professional in his attitude and his performance to do it. So do you think, he's not just coming up and just, like Djokovic, for example, he came in and just all of a sudden he just seemed to win everything, didn't he?
He won 3 slams in a year,
just
lost 6 matches all year.
Whereas Andy Murray's just sort of think, I'm getting there, this is my next hurdle, this is my next hurdle, this is my next hurdle. That's how it seems to me.
I think you'll find, both in Djokovic and Murray's case, the biggest factor in all this is their fitness.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It was only a couple of years ago that, fellow players at the top of the game were alluding to, without actually saying that, you know, you're a bit of a, you know, I won't say the word girl on here, but I just did, didn't I? But you're not going out there and playing strong. You're not able to see out the 5-set matches.
I could see his mental toughness more so than anything last night.
Well, Murray touched on that in the press conference, that he mentioned that people had criticised him for being soft in a way into those losing those tough matches, and it seems to be something that drives him. And now, like, he's really steeled that mental toughness to come out and beat Roger Federer in 5 sets in a Grand Slam semi-final. That's monumental. Especially Federer's beaten him in 3. They've played 3 times in Grand Slams before. They've all been finals. Like, there's mental scars getting beaten in 3 Grand Slam finals by the same guy. To come out and beat him in 5 sets. That's an outstanding achievement, Andy Murray.
In answer to your question, Craig, he was soft. I don't think there's any question about that early in his career. I think Djokovic suffered from the same problem.